What would you do if the only person who could calm your child was the one everyone else whispered you should fear? The scream wasn't a sound. It was a room filling with water. The marble-floored salon of the Serrano mansion held its breath, while a small boy clamped his teeth into a woman's forearm and shook like the bite was the last language he owned. He was 7 years old and had brown eyes that were beautiful, even when they burned. He had a name that meant wind over the sea gale, and the wind inside him was wild. "Let him go, señorita! He's going to hurt you!" The cook, Lupe, ran in circles that ended nowhere. The driver, Don Armando, hovered at the edge of panic, hands half raised, afraid to get closer. Every time he did, Gail snarled, a cornered animal guarding a thin border made of air. But the woman on her knees didn't pull away. "Easy," she whispered, steadying her own breathing, like she'd learned it once from a storm. "Shh, you're safe. Tú estás seguro." Her name was Alina Rojas. The white band of a cheap watch on her wrist had been bleached by years of soap and sun. Her uniform was a faded blue. Her sneakers were thin enough to feel the tiles through the soles. And she had eyes that met Gail's exactly where he was, not where anyone wished he would be. "Tranquilos," she told the adults without looking up. "Let me talk to him." "He doesn't talk," Lupe shot back, voice tight with fear and something like grief. "He hasn't talked in 2 years." Alina's answer was to lower her head just a little so Gail could see his own reflection soften in her gaze. "Does it hurt here?" she asked, tapping the center of her chest, not the place where his teeth were in her skin. "Sometimes when no one understands us, it hurts. Like this." She glanced once at her arm, at the teeth marks breaking skin, and then past it, through it, into him. The boy's jaw loosened. Not much, enough. His eyes flickered, slow, like someone shaking snow out of a branch. "The hurt in here," she said, tapping her chest again, "is like the hurt in my arm. But listen, I'm not angry with you." He released her. The whole house exhaled. For a long, long second, Alina and the child only looked at each other, and in that, looking, an invisible bridge anchored itself across a canyon. "It's hard to say what we feel sometimes, Verdad," she said. He nodded, a small, careful nod that felt like a sunrise. Then he did something that ripped a careful seam in time and stitched it back with gold. He leaned into her and folded himself into her lap, head under her chin. The sobbing sound he made, not the jagged one of fear, but the long, shaking one of relief. He cried like a boy who had finally found a place to put his body. "That's it. Ya pasó," Alina murmured, her hand moving slow over his hair. "Tina está aquí." It was how small children sometimes reshaped her name when they were learning mouths and letters. He'd never said it, but now it was hers again. Tina like a bell with a memory. Behind a column of carved stone, a man watched with a heart that had forgotten how to take a whole breath. Emiliano Serrano was the kind of wealthy people are careful around, the kind grief had stripped down to a threadbare core in a single night. Since the accident that took his wife Ariadna, he had learned to wear composure like a good suit. But that suit ripped whenever he looked at his son, and the boy looked back through him as if through glass. For 2 years, Gail had not hugged, not smiled, not reached. 6 specialized caregivers had tried to step into the place Ariadna used to stand. 6 had left with bite marks and tears they didn't show until they were already outside the gate. And now this. "Impossible!" A voice snapped from the doorway, clean and cold as a scalpel. Valeria Montemayor, 32, polished, the behavioral specialist Emiliano had hired 6 months ago. Her mouth formed an O of surprise, but her eyes did not arrive. "That's very strange," she murmured, watching the boy's small body sink against the woman in the uniform like a raft finds shore. "Very." "Why strange?" Emiliano asked, crossing the room, hope rising reckless in him like a kite. "Because children with Gail's profile don't change behavior like this without a clear trigger," Valeria said, lowering her voice as if the truth were a delicate animal. "Something is wrong." "Wrong?" He gestured helplessly. "He's calm. That's exactly my concern. He's too calm. A child who has been closed for this long doesn't flip a switch. Unless what?" His tone tightened around the word. Unless someone staged the crisis to look like the solution, she said, eyes sliding toward Alina, then away with an expression she wore like perfume. Professional worry. It happens. People provoke a meltdown to make themselves indispensable when they stop it. Alina on the floor pulled a small bundle of index cards from her canvas bag, each one neatly hand-drawn with bold markers, a red heart, a happy face, a sad face, a house, a car. These are for you, she told Gail, showing each picture like a magician revealing the next part of a trick that isn't a trick. When you want to tell me something, you can use these. If you're happy, show me this one. If you're sad, this one. Gail took the red heart like he was lifting something fragile from a river. He held it up with new light in his eyes. He smiled. It was small and shy and crooked and whole. Lupe's hand flew to her chest. Don Armando wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist and said, "To no one and to God, 2 years we waited to see that." Across the room, Valeria's pulse beat hard in her temples, so hard she was sure it was visible. 6 months, 6 long months of schedules, reports, controlled access, perfectly managed progress she could measure and manage again. 6 months getting close enough to Emiliano to see how relief softened him, how gratitude could be tutored into dependence if you fed it right. 6 months and now what? A girl with a faded uniform and a rag held back like a flag, who walked in with nothing but kindness and accomplished. In minutes, what Valeria's textbooks warned could take years. "Emiliano," Valeria said, voice mud-soft with concern, "please listen to me. I have a degree, a specialization, references. I am telling you this isn't normal. It's alarming." He looked at her. He looked back at his son. He looked at Alina's hands, at the way she didn't perform care but inhabited it. He split down the middle. "What should I do?" "Observe," Valeria said. Behind her false calm, Gears screamed, "We watch closely. True progress will continue. Manipulation will fall apart." She waited until Alina stood to bring Gail a glass of water. The cards, the heart, the faces, the small house sat in a neat stack on the coffee table. Valeria's fingers moved like a thief's who tells herself she's only straightening a picture frame. In one quick, practiced motion, she slipped the stack into her tote's zippered pocket. The smile she wore didn't even crack. 10 minutes later, Gail finished drinking. He reached for the cards. Not on the table, not under the cushion, not on the floor. He made the sound he made when his world didn't fit around him. A long, low, guttural note that vibrated the glass. He rocked forward and back, eyes unfocusing, breath quickening. "They're here, Gail," Alina said, scanning the room, her own pulse rising. "I'll find them. They're here." Too late. The old panic swept in. He hit his head against the wall once, twice again, the thud of it like something breaking under the skin of everyone who loved him. Valeria stepped into the doorway on cue with 2 precise expressions, pity and "I told you so." "You see?" she said quietly to Emiliano. She destabilized him completely. The next day the house absorbed a new contagion. Rumor. Valeria took her morning coffee in the kitchen and said, confidential to Lupe, "I hate to speak ill of anyone, but have you noticed how she looks at the señor?" Lupe frowned. Valeria lowered her voice further and raised her eyebrows higher. "She's young, pretty. He's a rich widower. Are we sure she's only here to work?" In the laundry with the other maids, Valeria spread seeds like a gardener who doesn't care what grows as long as it chokes. She takes such care with her hair, lipstick, perfume, for cleaning. And have you noticed how often she finds a reason to pass the office? When suspicion sprouts, it grows fast in houses with too many rooms and not enough truth. Alina moved through the mansion with her usual careful joy, unaware of the barbs in the walls. She said good morning and received cool nods back that didn't belong to these women 2 days ago. In her chest, something flickered, a small bad feeling with no name yet. That afternoon, Emiliano called Alina to his office. The mahogany desk, the leather chair, the framed degrees, all the symbols of control in a life that had stopped obeying symbols were in place. His face had a seriousness she hadn't seen from him, a solemnity that wore shame under it like a shirt. "Sit," he said, opening a drawer. He placed a delicate golden bracelet on the desk, diamonds catching the sunlight in precise prisms. "Do you recognize this?" Alina's eyes went wide. "No, senor, I've never seen that. Ever." "Valeria says she found it in your uniform pocket," he said, testing each word for weight. "It can't be." Her breath trembled. "How would that even be in my pocket? I swear to God, I have never." He studied her face the way men who have been lied to learn to study. Surprise, confusion, a lack of the tiny tells that betray a thief. But evidence. Evidence is a word with sharp edges. "This belonged to my wife," he said finally. "I can't have dishonesty in this house." "I am not dishonest," Alina cried softly. "I started working when I was 14. I have cleaned for families who forgot my name, but never found a peso missing. Why would I take something I didn't even know existed?" Her logic found a place to sit inside him. His fear made it stand up again. "I need time," he said, chilling, and the chill was worse than anger, "to decide if you can stay." A week stretched on the rack. The boy found Alina in every room, the way children find sunlight on winter floors. She put down mops and stories and picked up cards she'd remade with construction paper and markers because the last stack had gone where lost things go. She touched the back of his head while he drew. She called him mi amor because sometimes children become yours in ways blood can't explain. Valeria waited for her moment the way a hunter waits for dusk. On Saturday, Alina went to the market with Don Armando for bread and fruit and enough rice to feed a house. Valeria climbed the stairs to a door no one was allowed to open, Ariadna's room. Emiliano visited it once a week alone and left it exactly as it had been, a shrine to a life that could be touched only by memory. The keypad blinked red. Valeria's fingers paused over it as if in prayer. Then she typed Gail's birth date. She had watched enough times to be sure. The light turned green. Inside the safe, papers, 2 velvet boxes, history. Valeria lifted a necklace Emiliano had commissioned for Ariadna on their wedding day. Diamonds woven into a pattern so particular, any jeweler in Mexico City would recognize it on sight. She held it like it meant nothing and everything at once. Downstairs in the small room where the employees kept their things, she opened Alina's closet and slid the necklace far back into an old worn leather bag the girl carried to and from the bus. Then she went to the salon and waited, smoothing her expression into concern. Alina returned at the exact wrong moment. Emiliano was already seated with Valeria on the couch, his mouth a hard line. "Alina," he said without any of the softness her name had begun to teach his voice, "did you enter my wife's room last night?" "What room?" she asked, genuinely baffled. "I don't even know where it is." Valeria untangled her face into pity and delivered the final blow as if it pained her. "I saw you, around 10. I assumed the senor had asked you to tidy." "I wasn't here last night," Alina said, flushing with the force of trying to hold a trembling body steady. "I was with my mother. She had a fever." "Then how do you explain this?" Valeria opened her palm. The diamond necklace glittered like a verdict. Alina went white. Emiliano's voice broke on the words, "Where did you find that?" "In her closet," Valeria said. "Hidden." "Senor," Alina pleaded, tears pouring now with no way to stop. "I swear by my father's memory and my mother's health, I have never seen that. Someone put it there." "You thought no one would notice?" Emiliano said, and for the first time since she'd known him, there was pure hatred in his tone. "That necklace belonged to my wife. It was my gift to her on the happiest day of my life." "I didn't take it," Alina whispered, but he had already left the room where she stood to go, to the room where his grief kept its shoes lined up. "Get out of my house," or he yelled from the doorway, voice ricocheting off marble in fear. "Now, or I call the police and you go to jail." Her hands shook too hard to be of any use. She took off her uniform in the middle of the room like she was shedding a skin and handed it to him with the last of her pride folded into it. "Please," she said, voice breaking. "For Gail, let me explain. For him." "There is nothing to explain," he said, and in those 5 words entire futures collapsed. The staff gathered at the door the way people always do around someone else's disaster. Lupe shook her head with the sad impatience of someone who has seen too much. The other maids whispered things suspicion told them were true. Don Armando looked at the floor. Alina stepped out into the afternoon with only what she wore and the bag into which someone had planted a crime. Neighbors emerged to collect the spectacle. At an upstairs window, a small boy pounded the glass with his palms and screamed, face pressed to the pane, the sound thin and sharp in pure terror. He did not understand why his Tina was leaving again, why the world had turned upside down while he was still standing in it. Gail didn't eat dinner Saturday, or breakfast Sunday, or lunch. On Monday, Emiliano tried to get him to the car for school, and the boy melted onto the floor, sobbing so violently he could not breathe, rocking so hard the plates in the cupboard rattled. "He'll forget," Valeria murmured, faux compassion on her tongue like a sedative. Children forget quickly, especially children like him. But Gael did not forget. Pain stuck to him like burrs. On the third day without Alina, Emiliano found him in his room surrounded by paper, the floor a snowfall of drawings. Every page carried the same two figures, a woman with long hair and a small boy. That's Lena," Gal whispered, and it was the first word he'd spoken since she was thrown out. Emiliano dropped to his knees, heart hammering. In every drawing, the long-haired woman shielded the boy from a dark shape with short hair. In the newest sketch, the dark figure had squares behind her back, small colored cards. "Who is this?" Emiliano asked gently, pointing to the shadow. Gail took a fresh page and drew a woman with short hair down to her shoulders. He drew the small cards tucked out of sight. His hand was careful, angry. He looked up, eyes bright with a clarity that burned. "Valeria," Emiliano whispered, not a question. The boy nodded hard, made a disgusted sound deep in his throat, picked up a red pencil and scribbled over the dark figure until it disappeared under furious red. The floor under Emiliano's knees went soft. How much else had he missed? How much devastation wears professional clothing and smiles like help? "Stay here," he told his son. "Papa's gonna fix this." He ran to the garage, threw open Valeria's car, and searched with shaking hands glove compartment, back seats, trunk, under mat. Beneath the driver's seat, a flattened stack of familiar colors. He slid them out. The heart, the happy face, the sad face, the house, the car. Bent, wrinkled, but intact. Alina's cards. The cards that had helped his son touch language again. The anger that rose in him made the world tilt. He had to lean against the car to keep standing. Valeria had not only sabotaged the one thing that worked, she had weaponized the boy's hope. What else had she done in rooms he had trusted her to work in? He went inside with a new clarity whittled down to a point. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He breathed and did the thing he built empires with. A plan, quiet, precise. He installed miniature cameras, grain-of-rice lenses, high definition, hidden in corners and vents and the tiny seam between shelf and wall, throughout the rooms where Gale spent his days. He set them to capture video and audio. He did it himself. He told no one. 3 hours later, he opened the first file. If rage had a temperature, the room should have melted. On the screen, Valeria walked into the playroom, where Gale drew on the carpet with a crayon. She bent down behind him. "Your father is very sad because of Alina," she said. Then with 2 neat fingers, she pinched his arm hard. "You see? She only brought problems." The child flinched, cried out, scrambled away. She caught his wrist and pinched again, harder, the way you hurt something small, precisely so no bruise shows exactly where. He tried to stand. She yanked him back to the floor. "If you would stop crying for her all the time," she hissed, "your papa would be happy. But no, you keep making noise. You keep bothering." Another pinch. The camera captured the movement of her hand, the small sound of her breath, the way damage wears a tidy blouse. Emiliano stopped the video, stood up fast enough that the chair tipped, put his hands on the desk like they were the only part of him that still knew how to hold anything. He pressed play again because ignorance had been a luxury and he had used it up. "I have studied for years," Valeria told the child on screen, voice taut with a bitterness she would call professionalism if anyone asked. "I devote myself to you, and you only improve with a simple maid." She clamped his arm. "That can't happen." Guile rocked, faster, faster, making the sound that broke and broke and broke inside Emiliano's chest. Now she's gone, Valeria whispered, mean triumph curling behind her lips. And your papa needs me again, like he always has. Emiliano closed the laptop. Sometimes there is enough evidence. Sometimes the truth does not need more witnesses than your own eyes. He ran to his son's room. Ven, mi niño, he said softly. Come here. He knelt and touched the small bruise blooming on the boy's arm, like an answer to a question you didn't want to ask. Did she hurt you? Gail nodded, pulling in on himself like a fist. She won't hurt you again, Emiliano said. I promise. He found Valeria in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, telling Lupe some small story about oatmeal, as if nothing inside this house had changed. We need to talk, he announced and didn't bother with polite tone. In his office, door closed, he stood in front of the desk, the way she made parents stand in front of their fear. You have to leave, he said. Her face slid from surprise to the practiced concern she had used like a card trick since the day she arrived. What happened? Is this about the maid? Emiliano, you are making a mistake. She manipulated. This isn't working, he said flat. It's because of her, isn't it? She snapped, still thinking about her. She is not good for Gail. I saw how she played with Valeria, he said, and his voice had the edge steel gets when it stops pretending to be decor. Just go. She lifted her chin. If this is a dismissal, I want it in writing. You'll have until tomorrow morning to collect your things. She left with her mouth set in a line that meant later. The cameras caught her that night searching rooms she had no reason to be in, fingers trailing along shelves in the study, eyes moving like someone looking for a wire. In the morning, as the house warmed with coffee and a small boy asked for cartoons, Emiliano took his keys. Lupe, quédate con Gael, he said. I have to go out. Va a buscar a Alina? Lupe asked, relief and guilt both in her eyes. I'm going to try. It's time, Patron, she said, and the sentence softened the places in him that still thought time answered to his schedule. We know she didn't do anything. How do you know? He asked quietly. We're not fools, Lupe said, ashamed. Valeria always asked strange questions about Alina, always planting doubts. We let her. He nodded and left before his regret grew too large to carry. Las Flores wasn't a neighborhood someone like Emiliano drove through often. He parked and asked a woman watering plants if she knew Alina Rojas. Casa Azul, she said, pointing. Poor thing is very bad. Came home crying. They accused her of stealing. The guilt he carried became an anchor. He walked to the blue house and knocked. A thin woman in her 60s opened the door and crossed her arms, not as a greeting, but as a shield. You're the one who made my daughter cry, said Doña Socorro. I came to apologize, he said, and the words felt like a mouth half full of sand. I found proof. She's innocent. Ha! My daughter has always been innocent, Doña Socorro answered. She works since she was a kid. Never took a cent from anyone. Neighbors collected on the sidewalk because all stories in all places are communal. Please, Emiliano said, and did the only thing he could think to do when his pride wasn't important anymore. He dropped to his knees on the rough cement in front of everyone. Alina, he called, not loudly, because sometimes you call a person like you call a bird you don't want to scare. Please, listen, I can prove it. The door opened slowly. Alina stood in the frame with eyes swollen from a kind of crying that strips faces down to the child inside. He raised his phone with hands that didn't feel like his own and pressed play on the video. Her hand went to her mouth. She hurt him, Alina said. She really hurt him. Mucho, he said, and the two-syllable word broke in his throat. The women on the sidewalk murmured, we always knew she was decent. Rich people love judging the poor and other true things that have been true forever. Alina helped him up because even after everything, kindness lived in her like bone. Even if you clear my name, she said weakly, how could I return? People talk, the staff, the neighbors. I don't care what people say, he replied immediately. I do, she said. And if I do come back, I won't be the maid. I won't be the girl who cleans and loves your son for free. Inside, Doña Socorro clapped, cutting the audience out like she'd been doing it her whole life. We don't need the whole street in our business. They sat on the sagging couch. The small house smelled like coffee and soap and something else. Hope that wasn't sure it was allowed back in yet. I humiliated you, Emiliano said simply. I didn't believe you. It isn't only that, Alina said, twisting her fingers together. If I return, what am I? You're my employer. I was your employee. But I got attached to Gail and to you. The way a woman gets attached to a man, and we are from different worlds. Can I say something? Doña Socorro asked gently. Sí, Mama. I knew that boy from the first day you talked about him, she said. I had a brother like Gail, Antonio. He didn't speak, didn't like hugs, lived in his own world. Back then there wasn't a name for it. Now there is. The only person who could calm him was me. Only me. I never told you the whole story because you were small when he died. When you came home and told me about this child who only calmed with you, I thought, this is God's business. She turned to Emiliano. When a special child chooses someone, it's sacred. It isn't an accident. That boy and that man need my daughter, and she needs them. But if it doesn't work? Alina asked, fear peeking out from under her words. You going to spend your life wondering? Her mother asked. This man knelt on my sidewalk to say perdón. That's not nothing. Emiliano faced Alina and stripped his speech down to the part that mattered. Come back, he said. Not as staff, as family. Family? She echoed, afraid of the size of the word. Gail already sees you as a mother, he said and swallowed. And I see you as the woman who brought light into a house that forgot its windows. Alina looked at her mother. Socorro nodded. I'll come back, Alina said. But clearly, I am not your maid, and I am not yet the senora of your house. She smiled, a quick, sidewise thing. I'll be Gail's second mother. We'll see about the rest. They heard a commotion at the door. Lupe, breathless, with Gael tugging her hand hard enough to cut the circulation. He saw Alina through the window and broke free, running like a boy who understands one thing only, find safety. Tina, he shouted, and the word cracked open the sky. He threw himself at her, arms tight. Quédate, he said proudly. Stay. The boy who had used silence as a shield for 2 years chose a word and handed it to the person who had earned it. Lupe screamed. The neighbors clapped. Doña Socorro cried, Joy has a sound you can't fake. I'll stay, Alina promised over and over. Always. Gael looked up at his father. Papa brought Tina, he declared. Sí, mi niño, Emiliano said, kneeling to meet his son's eyes. And she's not leaving. The boy considered. Then, serious as a judge, he asked Alina, Tina, Mama? Alina and Emiliano looked at each other long enough to tuck a lifetime into a glance. If you want, she said, voice shaking. I want, Gael said, and smiled so wide the whole block caught fire with it. Alina, Emiliano blurted, tripping over his own breath, will you be the girlfriend of a man with a special son who fell in love with you? She flushed. Señor Emiliano, she began. Acceptas? Gael asked urgently, bouncing. I accept, she whispered, and the boy shot both fists in the air like someone had just invented winning. That was when Valeria's shadow stretched across the end of the street. She was thinner, uncombed, with an anger that made the air around her feel static. Emiliano, she called, a broken smile on her mouth. Good, I found you. What do you want? He asked, stepping between her and the family that had arranged itself without needing to be told. To talk, alone. We have nothing to say to each other. It was all a misunderstanding, she said. I can explain. Gail, at the sound of her voice, slid behind Alina and clung to her sweater. He's afraid of you, Alina whispered. Hola, Gael, Valeria cooed, forcing her face into a kindergarten teacher's. How are you? He didn't answer. He pressed closer to Alina until there was no space left. Go, Emiliano told Valeria. Now. You're making a mistake, Sarn, she said, turning to the crowd because audiences used to love her. She's not good for you. Now, the one who isn't good here is you, Doña Socorro said from the doorway, not raising her voice because truth doesn't have to shout. Hurting a child is wicked. I never hurt anyone, Valeria said, chin high. Emiliano held up his phone. He pressed play. Valeria watched herself on the screen pinching a child, hissing poison. She went pale. "That is out of context," she said quickly. "What context?" He fired back. "You assaulting a 7-year-old? You whispering lies into my son's ear?" "It was a moment of stress," she began. "I was—" "Valeria," Lupe cut in, soft but deadly. "Enough. We all heard how you spoke about Alina. The gossip, the questions. You weren't protecting anyone except yourself." Valeria's face flickered, pleading first, then bargaining. "Think about my career," she begged Emiliano. "If you report me, I lose everything." "Did you think about my son when you marked his skin?" he asked. "Please," she said, voice shaking. "I'll leave the city. I'll disappear. Don't call the police." "It's too late," he said calmly. "I sent the videos this morning." The mask fell. Straight anger burned through the professional varnish. "You'll regret this," she hissed, then turned and stalked away with the posture of someone who has never believed consequences could be for her. For a week, the house learned the shape of quiet again. "Tina, te quedas?" Gael asked each morning, and Alina said yes in all the languages love knows. He slept more, ate more, spoke more. The edges of him softened. The watches and cameras on the house sharpened. Then Emiliano's phone rang. "Señor Serrano," said a flat male voice. "Comandante Rios, we need to discuss Valeria Montemayor." "What happened?" "She fled," he said. "Left her apartment. 2 large suitcases. Canceled her phone. We're searching. But before she went, she made calls, threats. One to you. It went to voicemail." On an hour later, 2 officers sat in his living room and played the recording. Valeria's voice wobbled, almost drunk. "Emiliano, you destroyed my life. I'm going to destroy yours. You know where to find me." Gael pressed into Alina while the voice filled the room. "She's not coming back," Alina said into his hair. "Papa and I won't let her." They reinforced gates, changed passwords, reset the code to the safe. Lupe remembered things she hadn't said aloud, how Valeria had taken pictures of everything. For the doctor, including the keypad, how she had rifled the desk looking for paper, how she had asked how much he made and whether he wanted to marry again. It is astonishing what we excuse when we want to trust. 3 nights later, cameras caught a shape outside the gate. The sunrise showed the car's paint scratched and a message written in dust on the back window. "You have 48 hours. She called the next afternoon from a number that didn't exist. "Miss me?" Valeria asked lightly. "Where are you?" Emiliano kept his voice steady and low. "Closer than you think. What do you want?" "To discuss Gail's future," she sang. "And your recordings." "Recordings?" he said, ice spreading slowly, careful not to crack. "I know a lot of things," she said, "including your cute plan to report me." She laughed, a small, sharp thing. "If you do, I'll tell everyone your boy is violent and dangerous, that he attacked me. You know they'll listen. Children like him have trouble defending themselves." Silence stretched like a tripwire. "I'll also tell the story about the rich widower and the maid," she added sweetly. "We both know how much the press loves those." "That's a lie, and you know it." "Prove it. A man like you, a girl like her. People will eat it." "What's your price?" 250,000 pesos, she said without blinking, "and the destruction of every file." "You're insane." "I'm desperate," she said. "Desperate people do anything." The line went dead. Emiliano stood with the phone in his hand and a trembling in his muscles that felt like electricity trying to find a place to ground. He told Alina everything because there was nothing he would keep from her again. "She's trying to blackmail us," Alina said. "If you pay, she'll ask for more. And if she makes good on the threats, my son, your name—" "We face it together," Alina said, steady as a tree. Gael looked up from his drawing. "Papá triste," he said. "Un poquito," Emiliano admitted. "No estés triste," Gael said, hugging him. "Alina y yo te cuidamos. Sometimes courage is not loud. Sometimes it's a child drawing the bad thing for the police." "Papa," Gael said that night, "the woman mala. I'll draw her." "Would you?" Emiliano asked, dropping to his knees like the boy was a general and he a soldier. Gael nodded. Then the knock came that would change everything. "Señor Serrano," said Comandante Rios the next morning at headquarters, "bring the original files. The case has grown." He opened a heavy folder. After we released the initial bulletin, 5 more families came forward, not just in the city, Jalisco, Nuevo León, patterns match. Emiliano flipped through accounts that looked like his life through a different window. Sudden regressions, staff accused of theft, caregivers sabotaged, whispers that sounded like the same voice in different rooms. "But there is a problem," the commander added. "Some families won't testify. Shame, fear, privacy. Without cooperation, a conviction is harder." "What can I do?" Emiliano asked, thinking of the boy who still woke sometimes, shaking like he remembers water. "Convince them," the commander said simply. "Show them you had the courage to report. Ask them to stand with you." While Valeria ran, he called strangers and told them the worst things that had happened in his house. Some hung up, some cried, some agreed. A grandmother in Querétaro said, "That woman is the devil." An executive in the city said his son had been over-medicated until he floated through days instead of being in them. The words stacked like bricks into a wall she would not climb over. At home, Gail's nightmares didn't vanish just because the villain did. "Go away," he cried in the night. "Don't hurt." Alina held him until the trembling burned itself out. "She's gone," she said. "We promise." The therapist explained to them later what they already understood in their bones. When you've been scared long enough, even silence sounds like a threat. Healing takes time. Safety taught daily. Alina enrolled in university because some promises to yourself can't wait for perfect. Pedagogy. Classes at night after the center closed. Papers written at the kitchen table while bottles dried in a rack, and Gail practiced reading words he used to draw. "Amor," he wrote, tongue caught between teeth in concentration. "You already knew that one," she teased. "I want to spell it," he insisted, and did. The center itself began as an idea that had nowhere to sit and then found a small room to rent with white walls and possibility. Saturdays only. 5 children. Lupe made sandwiches like hugs. A pair of volunteer psychologists offered an afternoon to begin. "It's small," Alina told Emiliano, exhausted and glowing, "but it's a start. 2 families left because progress didn't arrive in a single weekend tied in a bow. 3 stayed. One little girl said agua for the first time, and the word sounded like a bell that calls people to tables. A boy named Pedro went 60 minutes without repeating the motion that had been his ocean. Gal knelt beside a new friend and said, "It's okay to be different. That's not a bad word." "Marry me," Emiliano said one evening. The question landing in the kitchen with the clatter of a glass almost slipped. She laughed, half crying. "We already are," she said. "Mostly." "I want to make it official," he replied. "I want us to be a family with papers and rings and bad dancing. And a baby," he added later, stumbling over the B of it like it was precious, "if you want." "I do," she said, and felt joy and fear hold hands. They told Gail together. He went incandescent. "I'll be El Paje," he declared. "I'll help with the baby." That night he drew a version of them with an extra small circle, all of them smiling like they'd invented it. A week before the wedding, on a Zihuatanejo beach, Gael crumbled in school. "I don't want anything to change," he sobbed. The therapist told them change is a lot even when it's good. They sat with him on the floor and promised the things you can promise. "Getting married only means we are exactly what we already are," Alina said. "A family." He made them swear she would still be his mama. They swore like people who understood vows. On the day itself, it rained in the morning like it had been saving it. Vendors fussed. Lupe wrung her hands. Emiliano shrugged. "We'll marry wet," he said, and sometimes that is exactly the correct attitude about rain. The sun came out half an hour before they needed it and laid gold on the water like approval. Alina wore a simple dress she'd bought from a rack and looked like a person who had survived and then chosen joy. A stray dog wandered into the ceremony and barked twice at the exact wrong time and then lay down in the aisle. Gal giggled. "He wants to be invited too," he said, and everyone knew this would be one of the stories they told forever. Later, when the music had become chatter and smoke, and the night was starting to put on its deeper blue, Alina pulled Emiliano into the shadow of a bougainvillea and said, "I took a test." He startled. "I'm pregnant," she said, and he picked her up and spun like a teenager instead of a man who had been very old for too long. Gail ran over, eyes huge. "There's a baby in Mama's stomach?" "See," she said. "I told you," he crowed, then promptly told everyone again. Leo arrived 6 months later on a Tuesday, while the city slept. Gail waited at the hospital, drooping in a chair and refusing to be taken home. "I have to meet my brother first," he said, and when the nurse finally wheeled a small wailing miracle into the room, Gael leaned over and whispered, "Hola, hermanito. Soy Gael. I'll take care of you." The baby stopped crying, as if the words settled on him like warm cloth. "He heard me," Gael breathed. "Of course," Melina said. "He knows your voice." Life rearranged itself, as it does. The center kept growing, sometimes with scraps and blessings, sometimes with checks signed by people who had seen a TV report and understood this was not about charity, but about dignity. Alina paused school for a while and returned later because degrees wait, but meaning does not. Gail had ordinary jealousy and extraordinary kindness. "Why does he cry so much?" he asked one long day. "Because he doesn't speak yet," Alina said. "You once cried like that too." "I did." He blinked. "You did. We all did," she said. He nodded, thoughtful, and fetched a blanket. Comandante Rios called one afternoon with the last stitch that closed the wound. "We found her," he said, "in a bus station in Puebla. False documents. Charges, abuse, threats, evidence, recordings, testimonies from 4 families who decided they were done being quiet." Months later, a judge read out a sentence. Prison, a prohibition from working with children ever again. Compensation for families, systemic changes where loopholes used to be. "Papa?" Gail asked that night, listening to the adults talk. "Did the Mala woman learn how to be Namala?" "We hope so," Emiliano said, "and she won't hurt any more kids." "Never," Zelina added, and meant it with her teeth. The years rolled forward without asking permission. The center expanded into a building with murals children painted in messy colors. 50 kids, then more. 5 staff, then more. A waitlist that made Alina ache and a network that started to answer. She finished her degree and talked about a graduate program, not because letters after your name mean love, but because they open doors that keep being shut. Gail invited a friend over and asked for pizza without flinching at the volume. Juan occasionally shouted. Gail learned to breathe through it instead of shrinking. On a Sunday afternoon, the garden behind the mansion held a family. Alina studied at a table with a nursing baby tucked into her. Emiliano played catch with a boy who laughed like he didn't remember a world where sound scared him. Doña Socorro crocheted in the shade, throwing love from a lawn chair. Lupe hummed in the kitchen, assembling a plate of fruit like a painter who knows color is a form of medicine. "Mama," Gal called, ball under his arm. "Can I tell you something?" He didn't wait. "I'm happy." Such a simple sentence. Such a complicated path to get it. "I'm happy too," Alina said. "Do you know why?" "Why?" "Because we are a real family and real families take care of each other." Emiliano stopped and came closer. "He's right," he said. "We had hard chapters, we got stronger, and now we get to help other families write theirs too." Leo, as if on cue, smiled a gummy sunrise. "Look," Alina laughed. "Leo agrees." That evening, Gal drew. He drew them all. Himself, his mama, his papa, his brother, his abuela, and he squeezed in Lupe because love isn't limited by payroll. Underneath, in letters careful and handsome, he wrote one word he had learned first with pictures, and then with sound, and finally with spelling he owned. Amor. "This is what we are," he told them, holding up the paper. "A family full of love." Emiliano framed that drawing and hung it on the wall with all the rest. There were the early pictures, charcoal nights and jagged shapes, anger and fear and red scribbled over things that hurt. There were the middle ones in which monsters had names and courage had a shape. There were the new ones, explosions of color, houses with open windows, stick figures with their arms stretched so wide they could hold the whole page. "Our whole story is on this wall," Alina said, standing with a baby on her hip and the man who had chosen to learn, and the boy who had chosen to speak, and the grandmother who had always known. Gail nodded solemnly. And there'll be more drawings, he said, because our story isn't over. If you'd stood on the sidewalk then and held your breath, you would have heard it, a house exhaling, not a mansion, a home. Somewhere inside it, a boy was practicing new words out loud. A baby was memorizing voices. A woman was looking at textbooks and seeing children's faces in the margins. And a man was learning to forgive himself and also to forgive the part of him that took longer than it should have to believe a gentle hand. Across town, in a place where the lights never dim properly, another woman watched a news segment about a small center that was changing how a city thought about difference. She did not feel the right things. She told herself stories about how she had been wronged. But in the quiet that came to every cell at night, there was a rectangle of dark in the middle of her thoughts where truth sat. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it just takes the future away from the hands that have proved they cannot be trusted with it. The rest of us will forget names and dates. We'll remember something else. A woman on a floor with a child's teeth in her skin who didn't pull back. A boy who made his first word a request. A father who learned that love is not control. A grandmother who knew signs before there were diagnoses. And a house that for a long time had been a museum of grief, and then piece by piece, day by day, became a place where people slept through the night.